Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Beatrice and today's video is a review of the novel Never Let Me Go by contemporary author Kazuo Ishiguro. Now if you've watched my channel before, you'll know that I talk about Jane Austen a lot, who is my favourite author, and I also talk a lot about religion and literature and how the Christian faith impacts a lot of the writers that we know and love. So today's video is quite different for me from my usual videos that I make, but I'm one that I'm very excited to be making because I feel like I'm branching out a little bit and bringing something a little bit different to you. So for the longest time, I thought I really hated science fiction as a genre. I found it like other genres, like sometimes mystery novels can be like that. I found science fiction to be quite formulaic, and I found the kind of sci-fi elements of it to be more important than the actual story and the characters in the story, and it never really appealed to me because of that. Then I picked up this copy that I just showed you of Never Let Me Go, just from a local charity shop, and I ended up really loving it, and loving it so much that I decided to read the rest of Ishiguro's novels, and I've now read everything he's written, and I can tell you that this particular novel is still my favourite of his. Now, don't be put off by the sci-fi label that I've attached to it. Not all of his novels are at all sci-fi. In fact, some of them could be described best as historical novels, I think, but all of them are in one way or another coming-of-age novels, and they're all very character-centered. So even if you think you wouldn't like something that includes elements of speculation about technology or the advancements of science or medicine, I think you should give this one a go because it really is a fantastic, fantastic novel. So, as I said, even after reading all of his novels, I still think that this one is the best he's written. It's remained my favourite, and hopefully I can convince you today to read it, and I can convince you why it's my favourite. So I'll try to keep this review as spoiler-free as possible. However, I will have to mention certain elements and certain plot points in the novel for it to make sense. So if you want to go into this completely blind, then I would skip this review, just go and read it and then come back. Otherwise, if you're happy to know a little bit about it before you read it, then keep watching. So let's get straight into it. Never Let Me Go is a really intense novel. In fact, I probably wouldn't recommend that you read it if you're going through a very intense period of your life. I'm pregnant right now and I have looked through it again to make this video, but I haven't fully reread it recently because it deals with really, really intense issues of ethics and how children are treated, so it might be something that might be very emotional, so be warned about that. It is a very upsetting and very sad book. However, it's also one that I think we should be reading and thinking about. So, what actually goes on in this novel? The story is narrated in the first person from the point of view of Kathy, who I believe when the narration begins is around 30 years old, but who is mostly thinking back about her childhood and her early adulthood, her teenage years, at a school called Hailsham, with her friends Ruth and Tommy. At first sight, Hailsham seems like the stereotypical British boarding school, nothing strange going on about it. But soon enough we discover something really disturbing. Although the children are treated well and educated with care, in fact, we discover that all the students at Hailsham are human clones created through new advancements in technology for the sole purpose of donating their organs once they are old enough to do so, once they become adults. They basically have no legal status as persons in society, and they're not even seen as fully human, really. And of course, they have no parents. They just have, I suppose, the clones that they were created from. And they have no real family other than each other at this school. They are bred for their bodies to be used by people who are sick and need new organs, essentially. So their fate is always to die, or what they call complete, by the time they're around 30, so that they can give their organs to people who are not healthy so that they can get healthier. So we discover all of this pretty quickly in the novel, and actually so do the protagonists, Kathy, Ruth and Tommy. they're not really aware of why they are at the school. I guess they know they're different from other kids, other children, but they don't really know why they are raised the way they are until they're told by a teacher called Miss Lucy, who takes pity on them, essentially, who becomes really upset about their fate and feels like her role at the school is not what she was expecting. She thought she would be helping these children to have the best life possible until they are made to donate their organs, but she realizes that actually she finds it really difficult to accept that these kids are being raised for this, so she feels like it's best for them to be told the truth about what's going to happen to them soon. What's interesting to me is that the kids don't really react much. They are, of course, upset, but at the same time, they have no power, they have no way of escaping their fate, so they're completely powerless, and they kind of quietly accept their fate at first, even though, of course, they become very upset about it later. And the rest of the novel, without spoiling too much of exactly what happens for you, is about the unfolding of a really complex relationship of friendship and love between these three protagonists as they kind of lose and find each other again in the very little time they have before their donations are due to begin. Now, there are many reasons why I think this novel works so well. First of all, as I mentioned, the sci-fi element does not distract from what is essentially a coming-of-age story about the value of memory and the necessity to use wisely the little time we have on Earth. If you enjoy about reading the theme of memory in general when you're reading a novel, I would assume that you would love all of Ishiguro's novels. He's really good at that, but this one especially. And for any of you who normally watch me for my Jane Austen content, I would actually say that you might really enjoy Never Let Me Go if you're a fan of Mansfield Park, because I think the main character of Kathy is actually quite similar to Fanny Price. Both Kathy in Never Let Me Go and Fanny in Mansfield Park are the moral centre of the novel, and even though they're really reserved and introspective, they're able to keep everyone around them grounded. So that might be a kind of way to approach Ishiguro, to think of it as a novel that is reminiscent of Mansfield Park in those ways, even though, of course, the actual plot is completely different. Something else that really struck me about this novel is its discussion of the role of art in our lives, so making art, creating things. The children at Hailsham are not considered human by a lot of people in outside society because they are clones. But the teachers working there want to basically prove to society that they should be treated at least humanely until they are harvested for their organs. So that is still going to happen. But until then, these teachers are trying to convince society that these kids should be treated more humanely because they might still have souls. And what's interesting is that the way they try to prove that they have souls is by having the kids make artwork that they can then display. Basically, they have to rely on their creativity to prove their humanity. This is really fascinating to me because on the one hand, there is something, of course, distinctly human about creating things, but at the same time, it can't be, I don't think creativity can be what defines whether someone has worth as a human being or not, which is what is implied in this novel. Well, rather, that's not the message of the novel, but that's what society in this novel thinks, right? Because when you think about it, newborns are not creative, elderly and sick people might not be very creative, people in a coma, people at their deathbed, there are all kinds of situations in which we might be very vulnerable and might not necessarily be making things or creating things. But we wouldn't say that these kinds of people are not people because of that, but that's sort of what's happening in the society of Never Let Me Go. And speaking of how we define personhood and the value of human life, if I were to give you just one reason to read this novel, is that as well as feeling very timeless in its exploration of friendship, love, memory and belonging, it also feels very timely in its discussion of really controversial ethical issues. While at the moment in our society, cloning is not really at the forefront of discussions about what medical procedures are morally permissible, there are so many other human rights issues that really divide people and that are very controversial right now. Just to name a few: abortion, IVF, surrogacy, assisted suicide, and even embryo experimentation. Our society is deeply divided about all of these issues, just in the same way that the society Never Let Me Go is divided about whether the clones are human beings and persons who should be treated like everyone else and given equal rights. And at the end of the novel, the answer is no. These kids are raised for their organs to be harvested, and they never really get rights like every other human being. I don't normally go too controversial on this channel, of course. I mostly talk about Jane Austen, which is not as controversial as this, but I have mentioned some of these more controversial issues today because I think it's really, really important to use literature to reflect about things like this that affect contemporary society, and ask these questions even if they're uncomfortable. And of course, I am not necessarily saying that Kazuo Ishiguro was thinking about these issues when he was writing Never Let Me Go, but I think his discussion of issues of bioethics can make us think about other issues that are applicable to our society right now. Because I think the society Never Let Me Go, just like our society at the moment, asks the wrong questions. Often, instead of asking how can we protect all human life, regardless of how vulnerable someone is, we ask how can we exploit scientific advancements for the betterment of the few at the expense of the many. We often don't stop and think about whether certain medical procedures are morally permissible. If we can do them, we will just do them, basically. And I think Never Let Me Go is so fantastic as a novel because it really makes us wonder about whether we should think of science like that. We should think of medicine like that. That is, if you can do something, you should do it, rather than stopping and actually thinking, but is this harming human life? So yes, I think this novel makes us very uncomfortable as readers, but I think it also forces us to confront these realities, which I think is really important to do, even if it does make us uncomfortable. Now, today's video, I will pause it here for today, has been a little bit less lighthearted than what I normally talk about, perhaps, but I'm glad that I was able to introduce some of these interesting issues, and I hope that I've made you think, even if you have read the novel and disagree with my, my assessment of it. And I should say now that there is likely to be a bit of a break on this channel after this video, as my due date for my second baby is next week. So I will be going on maternity leave. I will be pausing this channel and pausing all my other writing work for now, but I will be coming back very soon, a few weeks after her birth, hopefully. And I especially plan to make one more Jane Austen related video before Christmas, before the end of the year, just to round the year out with something more merry and cheerful. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful rest of your autumn or fall if you're over in the US, and thank you so much for watching as usual. Bye.